Keanu Reeves, widely admired as one of Hollywood's most humble and grounded stars, walked into a luxury car dealership on a sunny morning in Los Angeles. His outfit was simple yet characteristic, a well-loved leather jacket paired with faded jeans and scuffed boots. It was a stark contrast to the gleaming opulence of the dealership, where every surface seemed to shimmer with wealth and exclusivity. For Keanu, this was just another day. But what would unfold in the coming hours would leave an unforgettable impression, not just on the dealership, but on everyone who came to know the story. Los Angeles bustled with its usual morning energy. The streets hummed with life as cars zipped by and pedestrians moved with purpose. Keanu's relaxed gait set him apart, his every step unhurried, as though savoring the moment. A few fans recognized him along the way, their faces lighting up with surprise. Keanu, ever approachable, returned their waves with a warm smile or a subtle nod, making each interaction feel personal despite his larger-than-life persona. He soon reached a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street corner, a familiar spot that had become part of his routine. The bell above the door jingled softly as he entered, and the barista, a young man with an easygoing demeanor, greeted him with a grin. "Morning, Oliver," Keanu said, his voice warm and friendly. "How's everything today?" Oliver's grin widened. "Same as always." "The usual?" Keanu nodded. "The usual," he confirmed, his tone unhurried. As he waited for his coffee, his thoughts drifted to a project he'd been considering for months, a plan to restore a rare car and use it for a greater purpose. It wasn't just about owning something beautiful, it was about giving back, creating a story tied to kindness and impact. With his coffee in hand, Keanu strolled leisurely through the bustling streets, heading toward a luxury car dealership famous for its exclusive collection of high-end automobiles. The building stood as a testament to modern sophistication, its sleek glass facade gleaming in the sunlight. Minimalist and imposing, it invited only those with confidence and means to step inside. As Keanu pushed open the heavy glass doors, he was met with an immediate sense of grandeur. The polished marble floors seemed to sparkle under the soft overhead lighting, mirroring the flawless finishes of the cars displayed like prized artworks. The air carried a distinct aroma, a blend of new leather, polished chrome, and the faint hint of luxury cologne worn by the clientele. It was a sensory reminder of the wealth and exclusivity this place represented. Around him, the atmosphere buzzed with understated activity. Salespeople, dressed impeccably in tailored suits and gleaming watches, moved with precision through the showroom, their confidence evident in every step. They attended to clients whose every detail, from their designer shoes to their understated jewelry, spoke of lives steeped in privilege and indulgence. In contrast, Keanu's presence was refreshingly unassuming. His worn leather jacket, slightly scuffed boots, and casual demeanor set him apart from the polished opulence surrounding him. A few glances lingered on him, curious and fleeting, but most quickly dismissed him as an outlier, someone who didn't quite belong. The subtle whispers and sidelong looks were not lost on him, but he paid them no mind. Keanu had never been one to let surface judgments deter him. As he wandered deeper into the showroom, his eyes scanned the rows of luxury vehicles until they landed on a car tucked away at the far end of the space. It was different from the others, a vintage model that seemed to belong to another era entirely. Its design was a masterclass in timeless elegance, every curve and line a testament to the artistry of a bygone age. Keanu's steps slowed as he approached it, his focus narrowing to the car alone. The sleek curves, the impeccable finish, the aura of quiet exclusivity, it all captivated him. This wasn't just a car, it was a story, a piece of history preserved in steel and leather. Keanu moved closer, his fingers almost instinctively brushing against the flawless paintwork as he admired the intricate craftsmanship. He took in the smallest details, the gleaming chrome accents, the smooth contours of the body, the understated luxury that seemed to whisper rather than shout. To him, this car wasn't just a vehicle, it was an experience waiting to unfold. It was exactly what he had been searching for. The energy in the showroom subtly shifted as Keanu stood by the car, his quiet admiration setting him apart from the bustling sales environment. He could feel the curious glances of a few employees and customers, their attention piqued by the unlikely figure standing before such a rare piece of machinery. But Keanu remained unfazed, his focus unwavering as he continued to study the car. For him, it wasn't about appearances or status. It was about the connection, the story, and the potential he saw in the vehicle before him. The subtle contrast between Keanu's casual, grounded demeanor and the ostentatious surroundings couldn't have been more striking. Yet, in that moment, it was clear that his presence carried a quiet power, the kind that didn't rely on wealth or status, but on authenticity and purpose. And though the whispers and judgments of others swirled faintly around him, they were no match for the sense of calm and conviction he brought with him into that space. Looking around, Keanu spotted a salesman nearby, his attention fixed on a phone rather than the cars or potential clients. Keanu stepped forward and spoke politely. "Excuse me, could you tell me more about this model?" he asked, his tone calm and respectful. The salesman barely glanced up, his expression indifferent. "Hang on, I'll get someone," he muttered, walking away without offering further acknowledgement. Keanu remained where he was, his expression unchanging, though a faint furrow appeared on his brow. He turned back to the car, letting his admiration for its design distract him from the interaction. But the atmosphere in the showroom was beginning to shift. Whispers floated through the air, subtle but audible. "Does he even know where he is?" one employee murmured. "He doesn't look like he's buying anything," another added with a hint of disdain. Keanu heard them, but chose to ignore the comments, his focus remaining on the car in front of him. Moments later, the manager arrived. Richard, a man whose posture and sharp gaze exuded authority, approached Keanu with slow, deliberate steps. His smile was tight, more of a formality than a gesture of welcome. "This model is very exclusive," Richard began, his tone carrying an edge of skepticism. "It's not something just anyone can own." Keanu met Richard's gaze, his own expression calm and measured. "That's exactly why I'm interested," he replied, his voice steady and polite. Richard's eyes swept over Keanu's outfit, lingering on the scuffed boots and worn jacket. "Well," Richard said, his words dripping with condescension, "I hope you understand what you're looking at. This car isn't just a vehicle, it's a statement. It's for people who understand what luxury truly means." Keanu's expression didn't waver. "I believe I do," he said simply, his tone unwaveringly polite. But Richard's skepticism only deepened. "You do realize this car costs more than most homes in Beverly Hills, right?" he asked, stepping slightly closer as though to emphasize his point. Keanu's patience remained intact. "I'm aware," he said. "Could you tell me more about it?" Richard let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "People like you come in here all the time," he said, his voice low and dismissive. "They look, they dream, and then they leave. Let's not waste each other's time." The tension in the room was palpable, the whispers among employees growing quieter as the scene unfolded. Keanu looked at Richard, his calm gaze unwavering. "Funny how you seem to judge people so quickly," he said, his voice carrying an edge of quiet strength. "That says more about you than it does about me." Richard's face flushed, his composure slipping, but before he could respond, Keanu turned back to the car, his attention once again on its elegant design. It wasn't just a car to him. It was a symbol of something larger, a reminder that luxury isn't about appearances but about substance, respect, and the stories we choose to create. Keanu's gaze was immediately drawn to a car tucked away at the back of the showroom. It stood out from the others, its vintage design and perfectly curved lines radiating a sense of timeless elegance. Each detail seemed meticulously crafted, from the polished bodywork to the intricate accents that spoke of a bygone era. As he stepped closer, his admiration deepened. This wasn't just a car, it was a masterpiece. Keanu approached a nearby salesman, who was leaning against a sleek counter, more focused on his phone than on the bustling showroom around him. Without losing his signature calm demeanor, Keanu addressed him politely. "Excuse me, could you tell me more about this model?" he asked, his voice steady, Unassuming, the salesman barely looked up from his screen, offering only a brief, disinterested glance. "Hang on, I'll get someone," he muttered dismissively, before turning on his heel and walking away without further acknowledgement. Keanu stood there, still and composed, though the faintest furrow appeared on his brow, a subtle hint of unease that only the most observant might notice. He turned back to the car, letting his gaze trace the sleek contours of the bodywork. The vehicle's immaculate finish gleamed under the showroom lights, and its perfectly crafted lines seemed to tell a story of precision and artistry. For a moment, the car itself became his focus, a welcome distraction from the cold reception he had just experienced. Yet, even as he admired the craftsmanship, the murmurs from nearby began to ripple through the room, breaking the stillness. "Does he even know where he is?" a voice whispered from somewhere behind him, carrying a tone of disbelief. Another employee replied, their words laced with quiet derision. "He doesn't look like he's buying anything." Though the voices were hushed, they carried just enough weight to reach Keanu's ears. The words hung in the air like a challenge, but Keanu didn't react. He remained steady, his calm demeanor acting as a shield against the judgmental atmosphere that surrounded him. He chose silence, a deliberate decision to let the moment pass without confrontation. Instead, he stood quietly, his attention returning to the car, waiting patiently for someone to assist him. Minutes later, the soft click of polished shoes against the marble floor signaled the arrival of the manager. Richard, a tall man with sharp, angular features and an air of practiced authority, approached Keanu with measured, deliberate steps. His expression was unreadable at first, but there was a calculated edge to his gaze. Everything about him, from his stiff posture to the way he carried himself, suggested someone accustomed to wielding control in situations like these. When he finally spoke, his tone was neither friendly nor inviting. "This model is very exclusive, extremely rare," Richard began, his voice tinged with a subtle interrogation rather than genuine interest. There was no warmth in his words, only a veiled attempt to size up the man standing before him. Keanu turned to face him fully, his expression as steady as ever. His eyes met Richard's with a calm that seemed to disarm the tension in the room. "If only for a moment." "That's exactly what I'm looking for," he replied, his tone even and polite, unwavering in its sincerity. Despite the subtle challenge in Richard's demeanor, Keanu's response carried no trace of irritation or defensiveness. It was a simple, genuine statement, spoken with quiet conviction. But Richard wasn't convinced. His gaze shifted, scanning Keanu from head to toe with a lingering intensity that bordered on disdain. His eyes paused on the worn leather jacket, the faded jeans, the scuffed boots. There was no mistaking the judgment in his expression, the unspoken belief that Keanu's appearance didn't align with the exclusivity of the environment. Richard's demeanor subtly shifted, his posture stiffening further, as though he were trying to assert his authority over a man he had already dismissed in his mind. The room seemed to hold its breath, the faint murmurs from earlier now replaced by a tense silence. Employees glanced discreetly toward the scene, their curiosity piqued, while a few nearby customers pretended not to watch, their attention clearly drawn to the interaction. Yet, through it all, Keanu's presence remained unshaken. He stood there, composed and unflinching, his steady gaze meeting Richard's without wavering. "Is there a reason you're questioning my interest?" Keanu asked after a pause, his voice calm but laced with an unmistakable firmness. The question wasn't confrontational, but it carried a quiet power that demanded acknowledgement. It was a subtle reminder that judgments based on appearances often reveal more about the one making them than the one being judged. Richard's expression faltered for a split second, a crack in his confident facade, but he quickly recovered, his tone sharpening as he replied, "It's just that this car attracts a certain type of clientele," he said, his words carefully chosen but still tinged with condescension. "People who understand its value, people who can afford it." He gestured vaguely toward Keanu's attire, the implication clear even without further explanation. Keanu's gaze didn't waver. His calm remained intact, his presence quietly commanding despite the subtle hostility in the air. "It's fascinating," he said after a moment, his voice steady and deliberate. "How some people feel they can determine someone's worth just by looking at them." His words weren't loud, but they carried a weight that seemed to echo through the room. "That says more about you than it does about me." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face flushed slightly, his composure visibly shaken, though he tried to mask it with a tight-lipped smile. Around the room, the employees and customers who had been quietly observing the exchange now exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from curiosity to quiet approval. Keanu's words had shifted the atmosphere, turning what could have been a moment of confrontation into a lesson in humility. Keanu didn't wait for a reply. He turned his attention back to the car, his gaze softening as he once again admired its craftsmanship. The moment lingered, heavy with unspoken tension, but Keanu's quiet strength had already left its mark. The interaction wasn't just about the car. It was about something far greater, a reminder that true worth is never determined by appearances, but by character and integrity. "Well, I hope you're ready," Richard said, his words heavy with condescension. "This car isn't for just anyone." His tone carried the implication that Keanu might not measure up to the dealership's expectations. The tension in the air thickened, the unspoken challenge hanging between them. Keanu's expression didn't waver. He stood his ground, his calm presence contrasting sharply with Richard's thinly veiled disdain. There was no need for rebuttal or argument. Keanu's silence spoke volumes. Behind the calm exterior, however, lay a quiet resolve, an unspoken determination to let actions, not words, define the moment. As the exchange unfolded, the whispers among the staff grew quieter, the atmosphere in the showroom becoming more charged. Keanu, unfazed by the subtle hostility, continued to focus on the car. Its beauty, its history, its potential, these were the things that mattered to him. But Richard's demeanor and the dismissive attitude of the staff couldn't be ignored. The true test wasn't about the car's value. It was about respect, something far more valuable than any luxury vehicle. "I'm aware of what I'm looking at," Keanu said finally, his voice calm but firm. "Could you tell me more about its history and features?" His question, simple and genuine, seemed to catch Richard off guard. For a moment, the manager hesitated, as though debating whether to continue with his condescension or to engage sincerely. But his hesitation passed quickly, and his skepticism returned. "People like you come in all the time," Richard said, his tone sharper now. "They look at these cars, they dream a little, and then they leave. Let's not waste each other's time, shall we?" The tension in the room was palpable, the weight of Richard's words hanging heavily in the air. Keanu stood quietly, his calm gaze fixed on Richard. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet strength that seemed to unsettle the manager. "Funny," Keanu said after a moment, his voice measured. "How quick we are to judge others by what they wear or how they look. That often says more about us than it does about them." Richard's face reddened, his composure slipping as the subtle rebuke hit its mark. But Keanu didn't linger on the moment. Instead, he turned back to the car, his admiration for its craftsmanship undiminished. Despite the hostility around him, he chose to remain focused on what mattered, the potential he saw, both in the car and in the lesson this moment could teach. The room grew quieter still, the whispers fading as employees and clients alike began to sense the significance of what was unfolding. Keanu's presence, his quiet dignity, had shifted the energy in the space. It was no longer just about a car, it was about character, respect, and the choices we make when faced with judgment and prejudice. Keanu's calm demeanor remained steadfast, an unwavering calm that seemed almost out of place in the charged atmosphere. He offered a small, subtle smile, his gaze steady and measured. "I understand," he said simply, his voice even, but Richard's expression only hardened, his disdain becoming more apparent. "You do realize this car costs more than most homes in Beverly Hills, right?" Richard pressed, taking a deliberate step closer as if to emphasize his point. Keanu nodded slowly, his voice firm yet respectful. "That's why I'm here," he replied. "I'd like to know more about it." Richard let out a dry, dismissive laugh that echoed sharply through the quieting showroom. It was the kind of laugh that carried more scorn than humor. "People like you walk in here all the time," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You look at the cars, dream a little, and then walk out. If you're here to play pretend, don't waste my time." His words sliced through the air, cold and cutting. Around the room, employees paused their tasks, their curious eyes darting toward the unfolding confrontation. Even a few customers turned their attention to the scene, sensing the tension thickening like a storm cloud. Keanu stood rooted in place, his calm presence an unshakable contrast to Richard's hostility. He tilted his head slightly, his expression thoughtful, his demeanor unwavering. "What if I'm not here to dream?" he asked softly, his voice measured and deliberate, the tone carrying more weight than volume. Richard's response came swiftly, his tone sharp and laced with venom. "Then you're in the wrong place," he said with a smirk that bordered on contempt. "This dealership is for people who can pay, people who have something to prove." He made a dismissive gesture toward Keanu, his gaze sweeping over the worn leather jacket and jeans, lingering with disdain. "And you don't look like you have either." Keanu didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady, meeting Richard's with an unyielding calm that seemed to command the room's attention. After a pause, he spoke, his voice carrying the kind of quiet strength that silenced even the faintest murmurs. "It's interesting," he said, his tone even but resolute, "how you think you know so much about someone just by looking at them." His words hung in the air, sharp but not aggressive, slicing through Richard's arrogance with precision. "That says more about you than it does about me." For a moment, Richard's confident facade faltered. His smirk faded as the weight of Keanu's words settled over him. The room seemed to hold its breath, the employees and onlookers frozen as if afraid to break the fragile silence. The tension was palpable, the atmosphere electric with anticipation of what might come next. Richard's face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment, his composure cracking under the quiet intensity of Keanu's response. He stepped closer, his voice rising slightly, as though trying to regain control of the moment. "You don't belong here," he hissed, his words sharp and venomous, his frustration spilling over. His movements were tense, his posture rigid, as if his very authority was being challenged by the calm presence before him. Keanu remained composed, his posture relaxed but purposeful. His steady gaze met Richard's, unflinching and calm, as though daring him to reflect on the anger he was projecting. It wasn't just a clash of words, it was a confrontation of character, a moment that transcended the immediate setting to touch something deeper, a lesson in humility and respect. "The way you've treated me," Keanu continued, his voice steady but tinged with quiet firmness, "isn't about me at all. The anger you're feeling, that's something inside you. Maybe it's time to figure out why, instead of taking it out on someone else." His words were deliberate, carrying a depth that seemed to resonate far beyond the walls of the dealership. The room fell into a heavy silence. Richard's face reddened further, his breathing shallow as he struggled to respond. But Keanu had already turned, his footsteps echoing softly as he began to walk toward the door. Before stepping out, he paused and looked back over his shoulder, his voice calm but cutting through the tension like a blade. "Respect doesn't cost a thing. Maybe you should think about that." And with that, he left, leaving behind a room filled with stunned silence. The employees, the customers, even Richard himself stood frozen, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Keanu's words lingered, not as accusations, but as a challenge, a call to reflect on the values that truly matter. It wasn't just a lesson for Richard. It was a reminder to everyone present that dignity and respect are the real markers of character, not wealth or status. For a moment, Richard seemed taken aback, but his face quickly flushed with anger. His composure faltered, and he stepped closer, his tone turning venomous. "You don't belong here," he hissed, his voice low and filled with hostility. The tension in the room reached a breaking point as the manager's anger bubbled over. Before Richard could escalate further, Keanu moved with calm precision. As Richard raised his fist in a rash attempt at intimidation, Keanu intercepted it midair. His grip was firm yet controlled, a gesture of restraint rather than aggression. The entire showroom seemed to freeze, a stunned silence falling over the space as every eye turned to the confrontation. Keanu's voice, steady and unyielding, broke the silence. "The anger you're feeling has nothing to do with me," he said, his tone carrying an almost unsettling calm. "Maybe it's time you look inward and deal with that before taking it out on others." He released Richard's fist with the same measured composure, stepping back slightly but holding his gaze. Richard stumbled, his confidence shaken, his face a mix of anger and humiliation. The silence in the room was deafening, the tension almost unbearable. Employees and customers alike stood frozen, unsure of how to react to what they had just witnessed. Keanu adjusted his jacket, his movements deliberate, as if to emphasize that he had nothing to prove. He looked at Richard one last time, his voice calm but laced with undeniable firmness. "Respect doesn't cost a thing. Maybe you should think about that," he said simply, his words cutting through the air with quiet power. Without waiting for a response, Keanu turned and began walking toward the exit. His footsteps echoed through the silent showroom, each step a reminder of the grace and strength he had shown in the face of blatant disrespect. The employees and customers watched him leave, their expressions a mix of awe and reflection. The weight of his words lingered long after he was gone, leaving a profound silence in his wake. For Keanu, the encounter wasn't about proving his worth. It was about standing up for something far more important, the simple, universal value of treating others with dignity. As he stepped out into the sunlight, the tension of the moment gave way to a quiet sense of resolution. The lesson had been delivered, not with anger or aggression, but with the quiet strength of someone who understood the true meaning of respect. As Keanu released Richard's fist, he adjusted his jacket with quiet composure and turned toward the door. He paused briefly, glancing back over his shoulder. His voice was calm yet carried an unmistakable weight. "Respect doesn't cost a thing. Maybe you should think about that," he said simply. With that, he walked out, the sound of his steady footsteps echoing through the silent showroom, leaving a profound stillness in his wake. The fallout from the encounter was swift and far-reaching. A young man who had discreetly recorded the entire scene on his phone shared the video online. Within hours, it went viral, sparking outrage across social media. The public's reaction was overwhelmingly supportive of Keanu, condemning the blatant disrespect he had endured. Hashtags like "respect costs nothing" and "true luxury is respect" began trending, amplifying the conversation. The dealership faced an avalanche of criticism, with people vowing to boycott the business. Negative reviews flooded their pages, and their reputation began to crumble. Through it all, Keanu remained true to his nature, quiet, humble, and composed. He didn't issue any public statements, nor did he wade into the growing media storm that surrounded the incident. Instead, he let his actions speak louder than words. Just a few days later, Keanu was photographed at a modest car dealership, one known not for its grandeur, but for its reputation of treating every customer with fairness and respect. The atmosphere at this dealership couldn't have been more different. Warm smiles, genuine handshakes, and an air of inclusion replaced the judgment and pretension he'd faced earlier. Keanu's visit wasn't just about buying a car, it was a statement in itself. After making his purchase, he posed for a photo with the staff, their camaraderie evident in the image. He shared the photo on his social media, accompanied by a simple yet profound caption: "True luxury is being treated with respect." The understated power of his words resonated far and wide, stirring a wave of reflection among his followers and beyond. The story didn't fade into the background. Instead, it ignited a global conversation about respect, humility, and the pitfalls of judging others by their appearances. Social media lit up with people sharing their own stories of being underestimated or treated unfairly. Posts tagged with phrases like "respect is luxury" and "dignity matters" began trending, creating a collective voice for kindness and empathy. The impact of Keanu's quiet strength was undeniable. His refusal to retaliate turned what could have been a fleeting moment of bitterness into a catalyst for change. Keanu's actions reminded the world of a timeless truth. Respect and humility are not just virtues but necessities in building a more compassionate society. His ability to rise above the pettiness and transform it into a powerful lesson left an indelible mark, inspiring countless others to do the same. By choosing to focus on dignity and kindness, Keanu proved that sometimes the strongest statement is the one spoken through actions, not words. The incident became a touchstone for a broader movement, inspiring discussions about how we treat one another in everyday interactions. It reminded the world that true character is revealed not in grand gestures, but in the simple choices we make to listen, to empathize, and to treat others with decency, regardless of their background or appearance. Keanu's actions, understated yet profound, turned a moment of prejudice into a powerful lesson that would resonate far beyond the walls of the dealership. A few weeks after the dealership incident, the ripple effects of Keanu's quiet actions continued to unfold. Stories emerged from employees at the dealership, recounting how his visit had impacted their lives. One staff member shared how Keanu had taken the time to ask about their family, even recommending a local charity after hearing about their struggles. Another described the actor's genuine interest in their community, noting how he had encouraged them to keep fostering the welcoming and respectful environment they'd built. The dealership itself saw an unexpected surge in visitors, not just customers but individuals inspired by the story, drawn to the values the moment represented. Many came to thank the staff for showing that respect transcends status or celebrity, while others simply wanted to experience the kindness that Keanu had highlighted. For weeks, it became a hub of warmth and connection, proof that a single moment of integrity could inspire real change. Meanwhile, the global conversation Keanu had sparked continued to gain momentum. Schools, workplaces, and community centers began holding discussions and workshops centered around themes of dignity, empathy, and fairness. The hashtags "Respect is Luxury" and "Dignity Matters" became rallying cries, appearing on posters, t-shirts, and campaigns advocating for inclusion and respect in all spheres of life. Keanu, as always, remained in the background. He didn't capitalize on the movement or seek further attention, but his quiet leadership spoke volumes. His social media post became a mantra for many, reminding them that the way we treat others defines us far more than any material possession or outward success. In the months that followed, small acts of kindness and respect began to ripple through communities worldwide, each one inspired by Keanu's choice to rise above judgment and transform a moment of prejudice into an opportunity for growth. The dealership incident became more than just a story. It became a symbol of hope and a call to action for a kinder, more understanding world. And as the movement grew, it carried with it the enduring lesson that respect, in all its simplicity, truly is a form of luxury, one we can all afford to give.